Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So this was kind of a really, interesting program. I was very cheeky in calling it the Art of Fugue, obviously, but noting his Beethoven's real appreciation of the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. And as I had mentioned, we forget that during his lifetime, outside of musical circles, Bach's music was not very well known throughout Europe. And it was through his early teacher, Christoph Nefe, that he had this early exposure. Other composers did know of Bach. Mozart famously stumbled upon Bach and then was influenced to write his great fugues in the Jupiter Symphony, most especially. So it's once Bach's music sort of trickled out, the people in the know and the musicians knew exactly what they were latching onto. And the genius of Bach. I have a quote here from Beethoven, a very short sentence on Bach, and he says his name ought not to be Bach, which is brook in German, but ocean, because of his infinite and inexhaustible wealth of combinations and harmonies. So he was really an admirer of the great master Bach. And so toward the end of his career, wrote a fair number of fugues, and they weren't in these, if one who studies Bach writing strict fugues, Beethoven was a little bit loose with the structure of his fugues. He used the techniques of stretto and retrograde. Does anybody know these terms? Can anybody tell me what stretto means?
Stress.
Yes, a little bit. Yes, that's the Italian. But the stretto is when you take the fugue and you speed up their integration of the two voices, or three or multiple voices. So you have the statement and then the statement, and then you're layering it more quickly on top of one another, and that's called stretto. And then you have inversion, where you flip the fugue, you flip the tune of the fugue. And then the other major technique is retrograde, where you go backwards. You write the fugue tune backwards. So Beethoven utilized all of these techniques in his writing, but was not this very strict, formal fugue writer that Bach was at all. So we kicked off with the 110, and I kept in the intro. I felt a little weird just focusing on the fugue of that movement. I wanted to keep the movement in its entirety, and we studied the intro last week. But you see that the fugue of this 110, it just slowly unfolds and unfolds and unfolds. And it's almost like a chorale, that the writing that Beethoven is putting forth. Let me read a little passage from Swafford about this final movement of 110. He says, "The finale is fugal, the main subject based on the opening theme of the first movement. While the fugues in earlier sonatas were mostly robust unto aggressive, none more so than a Hammerklavier, this one flows like a choral work. As it reaches a climax, comes one another of those startling but somehow inevitable turns that mark the late music. The fugue abruptly falls to pieces, and we find ourselves back in the third movement arioso, now in G minor, more devastated than before." So in the middle of this fugue, he just sort of, it falls apart, and then he gives you the tune from the slow introduction arioso, and then picks the fugue back up to end the movement. It's really something, really wonderful writing. Do we have thoughts on Paul Lewis's Opus 110 fugue playing?
I enjoyed it.
You enjoyed it?
He has a light touch.
A light touch. I'd say yes in general, but wow, his left hand, when it started the fugue and the statement in the left hand, he went ba 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 ba. He really laid into it when that fugue came back to after the arioso statement. John, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, it was really a terrific, terrific performance. I mean, it's very much in keeping with how he handles all of his Beethoven pieces,
Yeah.
and how we heard him play it. So we're glad you did that.
Yeah, it's a really terrific, you know, to hear Paul, who's such a you know, there's a good reason why Paul Lewis is showing up time and time again on these Beethoven programs, because his playing of this classical Germanic repertoire is unparalleled. It's really just marvelous, marvelous.
I wonder with the left hand there, if he might have been reflecting on organ fugues, Bach pedal with the pedal, you know, suddenly pound coming in very, very heavy.
That's a great observation. Yeah, I had that sense of it, and just like as Swafford describes it as a chorale-like fugue, getting that deep organ, the pedal sound in that left hand was something. It was striking the way Paul did it. I mean, it was bam. It was really, really, really. I don't want to say heavy, but thick, the texture. And that's, you know, a very, you know, very straightforward sort of slowish fugue that unfolds, and very unlike the next fugue in the Hammerklavier. The Hammerklavier fugue is honestly one of the most difficult pieces in the piano literature. Even the greatest of pianists struggle with this movement, struggle to play it. And that was, you know, speaking in the show about what is difficult is also beautiful and good. So you hear, you know, Beethoven wanting to show the artist struggling through the work and provide you this sense of struggle. You'll never hear a note perfect rendition of this movement ever. It's just that difficult. And I wanted to read a couple passages. One from Jeremy Denk from his blog way back when he was practicing this piece. But first from Swafford. Swafford says, few listeners can follow all the twists and turns of the finale. Most only try to take in what sounds like a churning dynamism, glittering with trills. At the same time, a kind of epic athletic contest for a performer, struggling with piano keys and hammers and the limits of human endurance. What is difficult is good, and what is difficult is woven into the sounding impact of the Hammerklavier. A certain desperate quality in the performance is not only in some degree inevitable, but necessary. So, you know, it's speaking to this again, this great struggle, and you just hear all these voices and you get lost in all of its intricacies. And then he'll stop in the middle, give a little quietude, and then go right back in and attack the fugue again, and over again. And it's just like the Grosse Fuge, just a confounding fugue, absolutely confounding. And that it would come after, you know, we heard the slow movements in previous weeks, you know, and this follows it, and it's just extraordinary that he puts this just the change of the heartbeat of a performer, where you've got this quietude of about 8 minutes in the slow movement, and then all of a sudden, bam, you know, you've got the introduction, you know, that precedes this, and then you just go off, shot out of a cannon into this fugue. It's really something. I have a couple other quotes. This one's from Martin Cooper. Does anybody know who Martin Cooper was? Martin Cooper was a British musicologist, but perhaps he's more famously known as the father of Imogen Cooper, the pianist Imogen Cooper. So here's a short quote. He says, "There is in this finale, as in the Grosse Fuge, an element of excessiveness, an instinct to push every component part of the music not just to its logical conclusion, but beyond." He goes on to say that in a sense, Beethoven was thereby, quote, doing violence to his listener. I rather like that.
That's a great quote.
I rather like that. Yeah, I was saying before we started officially that, this is perhaps the most dissonant show that I've presented after Bartok,
Yeah.
these fugues. But here's Jeremy Denk from his blog. And Jeremy, if you don't know Jeremy's writing, he's such a charming and witty and just brilliant, just like he is as a human. I mean, he's just a wonderful, wonderful writer. And Jeremy, this is just a snippet of his blog on the Hammerklavier. And if you haven't perused his writings, if you go to his website, he has archived his New Yorker articles, his New York Review of Books. He did an article and his blog that he used to do fairly regularly, but he's way too busy to do it now. But Jeremy says, anyway, a certain mania sets in. The permutative insanity, kind of a musical caffeine orgy of Beethoven's often absurd contrapuntal writing, combined with the trills reproducing like well-fed amoeba all over the registers of the piano, induces a certain fever, a certain not againness. And as the subject reverberates around your practice room, you may feel haunted by some strange spirit, some fugal demon. You may be whimpering on the floor at a certain point, not in pleasure. It depends on the strength of your temperament. I looked to my iPhone for moral support, but it just sat there, pristine, magnificent, unconcerned on the counter. It simply refused to ring and rescue me from my work ethic. So, this is, when you speak to pianists about 106, and I said this when we looked at the slow movement, that the fugue, because of its sheer difficulty, often overshadows that sublime slow movement. But you talk to any pianist about performing the Hammerklavier, and they immediately get tense, because it's like the Mount Everest of piano writing. This sonata.
Didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and it's perhaps the least performed of his sonatas, I would say, one of the least performed because of that reason. It's scary. It's very scary for a pianist to perform this piece.
One adjective comes to mind that when I hear it all the time, besides the close to insanity, but I have the feeling of tortured, that he was tortured into sharing that sense with the listener when he was writing it.
Yeah. David, and this piece comes in the period where he didn't write much music because of his problems with his nephew Carl and the custody battle that was ensuing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that he was tortured and he was suffering from the stress of that process, for sure. Any other thoughts about Hammerklavier?
Yeah, I like your comment. Maybe I can understand it better, that he actually wanted the performer to fumble a bit, that it not play perfectly. And I've heard performers, yes, fumble even more.
Yeah, I mean, Gary, I'll confess something to you. This I wasn't originally going to put this on the program. Because I'm conscious of people messing up and things like that. But Jeremy's performance was extraordinary, and it wasn't perfect at all.
Really?
But it was wonderful. So I said, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. And, and that's, again, that's what music and performance isn't about being perfect. The most oftentimes the performances that seek to be perfect are just empty. So you definitely
hear saying that, Derek, is that perfect doesn't mean note perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Good point.
But what we missed out on tonight was just I wanted to also have a movement of the Diabelli variations. Yeah. Now here's at this piece, at this point in his life, he writes these, he gets obsessed with the Diabelli variations over this stupid, little waltz that Anton Diabelli wrote, and he wrote 33 variations. And he ended essentially with a fugue. based on the waltz. But he then did a coda, essentially a more quiet tempo di minuetto of the waltz. But I wanted to take a look quickly. It's a very short fugue. You know, it's about 3 minutes long, but I wanted to take a quick look at the score. And this fugue is what's known as a triple fugue. And basically all that means is that it's a fugue with 3 subjects. So subjects meaning themes. So I took the liberty of labeling the fugal subjects. And we'll listen to this after and follow the music as long. So we have here, it goes for ba beep ba 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 ba, and then in the left hand, the second statement goes, and then here we go, the first, second, the first in the tenor voice here, and then the second, and then the first here and the second, yada yada yada. And here's where we go stretto. See, ba 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 ba. So he's quickening the pace of these statements of the fugues, and basically he's just fragmenting that opening bar of the fugue here. So his first, second, yada yada yada, and here he imposes them simultaneously. Ba 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 ba. So he's doing them simultaneously here. And again, he does them simultaneously, one, and then the first fugue, yada, 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 yada. So I said this was a triple fugue. So where is the third statement? So he goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, builds, 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 forte, 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 and then the fermata. And then only then he introduces the third subject. And he goes along with the third subject, just plows along. He introduces this new third subject. And then here he goes. This is where it's crazy. And he does it sempre fortissimo. This is the highlight of the entire fugue. He has a third subject here, and look how quick. First subject, second subject, only 1 bar apart. And right here it's just chaos. These three tunes happening all at once here and going all the way to the fermata here, and then cadenza, and then he slows it down here. It's quite remarkable. So let's give a listen. I'm gonna stop the share. I need to optimize for computer sound. And here, let's give a listen to this fugue and try to listen for the voices. I'll follow around as it goes. You see how complicated it gets very, very quickly. Very, very quickly.
So whose
But-
performance was that, Derek?
Oh, sorry, that's Paul. That's Paul Lewis from last fall.
From last fall?
Yeah, last November.
You know, you might, Derek, you might mention to folks that they can see Paul playing this on the Wigmore Hall website. It was last Wednesday, and it's still up for another 3 weeks, I guess.
I
And
think you just did.
I'm sorry?
I think you just did.
Yeah, you just informed them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really a lovely, and it's a great performance, it really is.
I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet.
You should.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I think it's the best of the 5 or 6 times we've seen him do this, so. Even better than last fall with you, but I mean,
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but it was really terrific.
But here he is, he takes these variations, and all of the variations are, I forget in the home key, but this is the one movement that's not in the home key, the fugue, which is really interesting. And the fact that he would just take this, after 31 variations, he just goes into this crazy fugue. Is just wonderful. It's just so wonderful. Yeah. So
Well,
I
it's
saw
the second fugue too. He did it. There's another fugue, just like 3 variations before.
before that, yes,
Yeah.
but this is the major fugue of the
Really?
So Derek, have people talked about how he decided what order to put all those variations in when you play them? I mean, there must have been a strategy to that, or a thought, or several thoughts.
That's a really great question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
You
be
know what?
interesting.
I'll ask Paul about that. I'll write him after I see this, and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was sad not to include this little fugue in the show. We just ran out of time with those 2 big fugues featured in the show. But so then we turn to Opus 131, and here he starts the piece with this slow and sad fugue. And it's just, typically these, fugues would happen in the middle of pieces, and here, he gives them prominence when he puts them at the end. But here he is starting a piece with a very, very slow fugue. And very interestingly, if we had some more time, I'd play it for you. He fashions it after Bach's own C sharp minor fugue, which is also very slow and very deliberate, and is about 7 minutes long, that fugue. So you should seek that out. I wanted to play it for you tonight, but there just wasn't enough time to do so. Do we have any thoughts about 131? I mean, it's such a remarkable fugue, how it just slowly just unfurls all of this, and go da dee da dee. It's so great how it always lands on that third note with this sforzando. It's marvelous, really, really marvelous. And I thought the Eben really was a wonderful performance. We've heard different movements throughout the course of the festival of the Eben's playing, and it's really, really wonderful. But I wanted to turn to the Grosse Fuge, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time tonight on the Grosse Fuge because we're repeating it next week. I thought it was, as I was saying earlier, that this piece needs to be repeated. It's one of those, just like Stravinsky said, it's as contemporary today as it was back then. And the more we listen to it, the more we can understand it. And that his publisher was so worried about it, including it in the pieces, and that Beethoven was convinced to substitute a finale is quite extraordinary. We'll listen to that substitute movement next week. But his publisher also tried to convince him to do a piano arrangement of 4 hands for it, and Beethoven wasn't interested in doing it. So his publisher hired someone else to do it, and they sent it to Beethoven, and he was really upset. He thought it was really terrible, and he ended up doing it himself. And the thinking is that the publisher pushed it on Beethoven because he was trying to force him to make it a separate opus. That he was really trying to force Beethoven's hand in creating a separate opus. So so he did create this piano arrangement of 4 hands, and it's Opus 134, and he did it just after he completed the 131. But does anybody know this recent significance of that piece?
Oh,
So the manuscript of this piece, which was the 4-hand piano arrangement of the Grosse Fuge, Opus 134, was recently discovered in 2005, actually, in a seminary outside of Philadelphia. You don't remember that? Is that hitting the news?
no.
So they were going through the library of the seminary, and they had documents, and apparently they had found some scores of Mozart and Haydn in 1990 in this library, and you know, buried under stuff. It's sort of like a Citizen Kane-like thing. So they stumbled upon this manuscript of Beethoven's just in Wynwood, Pennsylvania. And it was a very significant discovery, obviously, but Beethoven had made these significant corrections and rubbed the paper so much that he put a hole in the paper with his eraser. And it's quite extraordinary. And the manuscript was sold for $1.95 million. And a collector, a very famous collector in New York who's affiliated with Juilliard, gave it to Juilliard. So the manuscript now sits at Juilliard. But it was fascinating that I was in Philadelphia at the time of this discovery, and it was a major development. It was quite cool. And I think I may have told the story of when I heard a performance of the 4-hand version. I should say it's 4 hands, but it's 2 pianos. It's a 2-piano version. I heard a performance at the 92nd Street Y of Richard Good and Jonathan Biss. And in the midst of the Grosse Fuge, a piece that's so complicated, I can tell you that I've heard string quartets get lost in the middle of it and had to start over again. In the middle of this performance, Richard Good's page turner got lost. And there was about 4 pages where he was whipping the page back and everything. And I was so nervous, I felt sick. I was so horrified. And I went backstage afterwards, and you know, I was speaking to Jonathan, and Jonathan said if it was him that the page turner failed like that, he would have had to stop. It was only through Richard's, you know, sheer brilliance that he could get through that ordeal. It was really something. I mean, it was terrible. It was terrible to watch because you just saw it unfold. It was terrible. So, but it's not, you know, again, it's still difficult on piano, and that arrangement's not done very much at all. But you know, Beethoven approved, obviously he did the arrangement, but significantly that the publisher had to pay 3 times for a piece that he didn't like. He had to pay the commission. He had to pay the commission for the quartet with the Grosse Fuge. He had to pay the separate Grosse Fuge, Opus 133 piece, and now this arrangement, Opus 134. Imagine that. So Beethoven, in the end, got the better of him.
Occasionally, there's justice in the world.
Exactly. But there's one other major fugue in Beethoven's late period that I liken to the Grosse Fuge and the Hammerklavier fugue. Can anybody name that fugue? What piece it's from? I think I may have mentioned it on a previous Zoom.
From the late period.
Well,
This sounds like a quiz show. Name that fugue.
Name that fugue.
Oh, you mean, are you talking about 111? Or
No.
no, 111 is not really a fugue.
No.
There's the fugue in the cello piano sonata on the number 5, but I wouldn't call that one of the most major ones, although it's a wonderful piece.
I think it's a major, and yes, that's correct. It's the Opus 102, number 2.
Right, the fifth sonata.
Fifth cello sonata. It's significant, David, in its harmonic complexity. It's not like the Opus 110 fugue. It's even, I'd say, not like the Diabelli fugue. It's one of these sort of strange harmonic fugues that it's just a little weird. So I wanted to play some for you. So I have a performance. We had heard the first movement of Oliver Herbert playing this sonata a couple weeks back, and let's play that YouTube of him playing the fugue, the last movement. Can we see the screen?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Oliver, yep, okay,
Yes.
great. Here we go. So it's, you know, it's not one of these tuneful things, right? I mean, it's just, it's really, yeah. I mean, it's just goes and goes. It's all this counterpoint, 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 and no, there's not the technical struggle that happens in the other two for sure. But it's really sort of quizzical when you listen to it, right? Doesn't really sit in the ear so well. Yeah.
Which is what Beethoven intended.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's just like I said, he didn't care. You know, he didn't really care. But it's a marvelous. I remember the first time I heard that sonata as a kid, and I just walked out of the concert hall. I was like, what? I couldn't grasp it at all.
Well, it's also another puzzling thing about it is that it moves along all of a sudden, and then he gets to that da dee da dee, and it's a complete change, and then he goes back to the more frenetic quality, and he keeps up until the end, and he finishes in that sense. It's great. It's a wonderful piece to play, and it's very satisfying. But in certain ways, as you say, the harmonically it's complex, but it's not. It doesn't have that complexity of, 3 or 4 subjects and that intensity. That in that sense, it's different from the other fugues.
Absolutely. It's less. I guess what I was going for, David. It's less accessible than, let's say, the Opus 131 or the Opus 110. I think for the ear. It's tricky. It's not a catchy little number, but I guess none of them are. Any other thoughts about these fugues tonight?
Well, Dirk, I just wanted to thank you for focusing on fugues, because the very word fugue is a turnoff for lots of people. And the fact that some of these are incredibly complicated fugues, even more so.
You can't shy away from this music. All of the works tonight that I've featured are just, great masterworks of his late period. And the fugue, and the fact that Beethoven in his late period would focus on fugues is significant in itself, and requires the focus. Sure, I'm sure that people were turning off the dial in the middle of the Hammerklavier. I don't know, maybe, but this music is important. It's very important to know this. And the Grosse Fuge, I'll say it again. I mean, you have to listen to that piece over and over again. It's so wonderful that he pulls this piece out. I mean, it's incredible, and that the same piece in that quartet has one of the most sad, beautiful movements in the cavatina. Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm focusing on Opus 130 next week. I mean, it's truly a remarkable piece. But we'll focus. So next week we'll focus a little bit more on the Grosse Fuge. I promise I'm not going to even try to break it down for you, but it's really, give a listen to the Grosse Fuge. It's great to just know it a little bit more and know what he's doing rather than listening to it fresh for the first time. So thank you, everybody. I'll see you next Monday night.
Thank you.
Just a comment.
Yes.
Beethoven's baptismal date was December 17th.
That's right.
So his birthday was probably the 16th. So I propose that everybody here, anyway, pick Wednesday. I propose everybody sing Happy Birthday, Ludwig. It doesn't matter what keys you sing in, doesn't matter whether you sing out of tune like I do. It's okay, because Beethoven can't hear us.
And sing it fugally, Gary.
Excellent suggestion.
Exactly.
This will be a great fugue.
All right, everybody. Have a great night.
Okay. Good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.